Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have a full review of the OPPO Find N3 Flip. Let's get started. This is a high-end device in the flip format. In some things, it will fall short compared to traditional high-end devices, but obviously its design is its differentiating point. In a moment, I will tell you some of the advantages of having a foldable device for you to tell me if this is enough for you or you prefer to go for the traditional format devices. But first, let me tell you about its price. In Mexico, it has been launched at 24,999 pesos. That is approximately $1,450. Although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. But based on that price, let's see what it has to offer us because it is exactly the same price as its main competitor, which is the Galaxy Z Flip 5. In a later video, we will do some comparisons so you can get to know them in more depth. In this external area, we will find a very nice glass design. I'll talk about the screen a little bit later on, but for now, let me give you the information that this external screen is protected with Gorilla Glass Victus. So I think it gives you a good level of resistance. When it's in this folded format, it's going to offer us 16.45 millimeters thick, whereas when it's unfolded, it's going to come in at 7.79 millimeters on this side. The entire external part is made of glass, with metal frames and hinge, so I think it does have premium materials, without a doubt. Even this back cover, you'll notice that it projects in different ways this color. It's a very reflective design, so personally, I would have preferred a matte or satin design, but in this case, it's going to fully reflect the light and the image. Although, obviously, everything can change if you put a case on it. Personally, I like the way it looks with a case without any additional reflection. In fact, this case is included in the box and it's a very positive thing since Samsung doesn't even include the charger, so much less the case, but OPPO does. The small detail with the holster on the foldables is that it may require some adhesive so that it doesn't peel off so easily. So in this case, here comes this adhesive. But if you're one of those people who tends to take off and put on your holster constantly, I think it's something that you can't do as comfortably on the foldables. So I think this is a point you should consider. On the right side, we have the power button, which at the same time is a fingerprint reader, and also the volume buttons. On the left side, we have this switch that will allow us to switch between a sound mode, a vibration mode, or a silent mode. This alert slider is one of the best additions because currently few manufacturers usually incorporate such a feature at the hardware level. At the top, we have a microphone and an audio output, while at the bottom is the slot to put the nano SIM card. In some regions, you can fit 2 nano SIM cards, but in Mexico, only one slot will be available because it arrives with Telcel. There is also a microphone, the USB-C port, and the main speaker. And there are some very nice design details such as the contour that has the camera module, which is really nice to see constantly. And they also have a micro-carved hinge, that's what OPPO has called it, so that it has a light projection with waves. It really looks very nice. This color is called Glossy Pearl and it's also available in satin black. And regarding the hinge, we have excellent durability as OPPO guarantees that it has passed the 1 million fold test. That's an exaggerated durability, and really note that it's a hinge that has very good precision. Only at the tightest angles will you notice that it can become closed, but that's completely understandable. It's actually quite good. Similarly, in the most open angles, it can open completely, but I insist that it is something very normal to see in several folding. Really, the advantage is that it does get to stay with good firmness in the tight angle. So let me tell you the advantages of folding. For example, we have a very compact design that you can store very easily in a small bag. That's an advantage that mainly applies to women. Additionally, you can place this foldable in this format on a table or on a flat surface. And even if you don't have a tripod, you can still take pictures of yourself. This can be especially useful on vacation or if you don't have someone to take pictures of you and you place this device on any surface. You can easily record yourself. Also, OPPO seems to me to adapt well several features of their system with this FlexForm format. I'll show you all those details in the software section though. On the inside, OPPO has a good use of the front, although still not at the level of traditional devices because the bezels are slightly larger, giving us a utilization of less than 90%. But I think it's still a considerably attractive and very nice design anyway. Also, thanks to this protective mica that OPPO puts on the ultra-thin glass, we're going to have little reflection compared against other devices, and you'll also notice that the crease area is hardly noticeable when the screen is on. When the screen is off, you'll notice this crease a little bit more. But honestly, it's not annoying at all. Even running your finger over it is not that noticeable, unlike its biggest competitor from Samsung. So, it has very good weapons to compete at the design level. However, it does not offer us a level of resistance against water unlike Samsung's proposal, and that will be its main weakness. You have to be very careful that it is not going to fall into the water, because it is not so likely to survive, although OPPO claims that it has passed various tests, but obviously the fact of having some certification would give us more security. Let's talk about the external display at the specification level, because it's 3.26 inches in size, with an SD resolution 720 by 382 pixels. So it's not an ultra-detailed screen like the internal screen. But I think it serves its function perfectly. Its ratio is 19.9 to 9, that is practically 20 to 9, which in layman's terms would be a very similar shape to what we see on the internal displays. That allows applications to be adapted more easily. So it really is a very interesting proposal that OPPO has, unlike other manufacturers that have the external display in a more square format. This is an OLED screen that is going to offer us good contrast and good color, and you can even vary its refresh rate between 30 or 60 Hz. However, it is a simple screen in terms of brightness and color. It is 8-bit and offers us a maximum peak of 900 nits in certain areas, and 800 nits across the entire screen. So the brightness level is good enough for viewing information outdoors, but it is not a spectacular display as we will have on the internal screen. This screen is 6.8 inches with a full HD plus resolution, 2520 by 1080 pixels. So it has a 21:9 ratio, slightly wider than normal. Although it's becoming more and more normal to see these types of screens. We have a pixel density of 403 pixels per inch, so we have a very good level of detail. And again, it's an OLED screen, so it gives us rich color, very high contrasts. And in this case, it gives us 10 bits in color depth. So we have a very high number of colors that it's capable of displaying. The display is compatible with HDR content and also supports XDR. So notice how when viewing some photographs, it will be able to project more illumination in certain areas to give it a higher level of realism. It's hard to perceive this through the camera, but I think you can get to notice it slightly. In real life, it's much more noticeable. But it's really nice to have these kinds of features that are able to project more brightness in specific areas. Because for displaying your pictures, it looks excellent. This display peaks at 1200 nits across the entire screen, but 1600 nits in specific areas when you're watching XDR content. So it's really a very good screen in terms of brightness, both at maximum brightness and minimum brightness. It gives us totally comfortable use. And speaking of comfort, it also includes the natural tone mode with which it's going to match the white color of the environment to have a much more comfortable viewing, even if the environment has cooler or warmer lighting. This is a feature that very few devices incorporate. That is why I highlight it. And at the software level, it also comes with various enhancers to increase the sharpness of images or videos, although with some compatible applications. You can also enable the bright HDR video mode so that the screen raises its brightness to the maximum when watching this type of content. So, there is no doubt that it is a very advanced display and also its refresh rate is very high. It can go up to about 20 Hz, and it can even go down to 1 Hz on static content if you have automatic selection enabled. Although manually you can also vary between 120 or 60. But ideally keep the automatic setting, and the experience is definitely extremely smooth in all animations and movements, both when scrolling and when opening or closing applications. In conclusion, the internal screen is totally good and the external screen has a very good vertical format proposal. This device incorporates 2 speakers but 3 audio outputs. That is, we have the main speaker which is placed in the lower area, and in the upper area we have an audio output, but also another audio output will be placed in the earpiece for calls. So we have stereo sound through these 2 speakers, and I must tell you that it sounds loud and clear, although it is an asymmetrical sound since the lower speaker is the one with more power and greater presence of bass frequencies, leaving the upper speaker only for medium and high frequencies. But what do you think if we listen to a small test? Although remember that it is not the same to listen to it live. An important point to consider is that it has no headphone jack, so if you want to use wired headphones, you will necessarily need headphones with USB-C or an adapter. Through the software, OPPO offers Dolby Atmos for you to select a specific profile or preset, and when you have headphones connected exclusively using the music preset, you can access a 10-band equalizer. But there are other devices that do allow you to modify the equalization without the need to have headphones connected, so the experience here could still improve. One advantage this device has is that it has spatial audio but exclusively with headphones connected, so you have an even more immersive experience. But if you want to use headphones without wired headphones, the advantage is that this device supports advanced codecs, so we have aptX, aptX HD, LDAC, and LHDC. With OPPO's Enco headphones, you are going to have this support for wireless high-resolution audio. In this sense, it does have a very good experience because you don't necessarily need to use OPPO headphones, but you could also use headphones from other brands compatible with these codecs to have full resolution audio without cables. You will then hear an audio recorded with the microphones of this device.
Esta es una prueba de audio captada con los micrófonos de OPPO Find N3 Flip en un ambiente silencioso.
As I had already anticipated, we find two microphones on the sides of this device, so when you are recording in horizontal format perfectly, you have stereo sound pickup, but now we will simulate a concert, so we will put very loud music, and we will notice how the microphones of this cell phone record in this type of conditions. We can be sure that these microphones pick up audio perfectly well, both in voice and in concerts. The front camera is 32 megapixels with f2.4 aperture, although it does not work at those pixels despite having a high-resolution sensor. One thing that could be improved is the quick launch, as it is turned off by default to begin with and only works when you have the device with the screen off. You can double press the volume button and this way you'll enter the camera app. But note that if you are in any other app and want to quickly access the camera, you don't have any gesture to do that action. This front camera will take pictures quickly. If we hold down the shutter, we start a video recording that we can resume if we slide up. In fact, we can also change the behavior of holding down the shutter to launch a burst. But there are other devices that allow us to have both functions. And in fact, in this case, the front camera definitely does not launch any burst. Another advantage of a foldable device is that you can use the main system as a front camera. That is, you can press this button and see how the back screen is activated. And now we can take pictures using the main photographic system, which is of excellent quality. In fact, we can also use the ultra-wide camera or the zoom camera. So the truth is that in this aspect, the experience is completely good, because you can also have the device completely closed and access this camera. Only in this format it does not allow you to change many parameters, but simply the ratio of the photograph. You can also activate a timer and activate constant captures. There is also a button for beauty mode here, but it only offers to turn it on or off. But when the device is deployed, it does offer more facial retouching settings, which are actually quite a lot. It also offers access to some filters, among them the master filters that are worked in collaboration with Hasselblad. And as I had anticipated, you could also get to fold the device in an intermediate format. And notice how perfectly the interface adapts to have the controls at the bottom and all the preview at the top. In fact, it also has another button so you can change the format and have the preview at the bottom. This can help you to have some other photo formats depending on how you arrange the phone. And as I anticipated as well, you could very well use the back system with the flex form format to take pictures easily, as it also has the easy capture recognition through the palm of your hand. The front camera definitely takes good pictures. The textures aren't as sharp though. That is, you can't tell it's a 32 megapixel camera. This camera does not have autofocus. That probably means that we don't have such a high level of detail when we are a little far away from the camera. But when we get a little closer to the camera, the level of detail improves. Although I insist that the 32 megapixels are still not noticeable. It looks like a 12 megapixel photo. Interestingly, they let you zoom in with the front camera just in case you want to see more details of your face. In backlit conditions, it looks a totally burnt preview, but after taking the picture, it processes it correctly, and honestly, it has a good balance of highlights and shadows, so backlit pictures come out well. In fact, indoor pictures also come out in good quality despite not having as much lighting. We see good color rendering and virtually no noise even in the darkest areas. On the other hand, at night, the result will also be positive as there is no significant noise and color saturation is still good. Although the level of detail is still not spectacular, but it is very similar to what we see in the daytime. The device also has a night mode that will make it easier for you to take pictures even if you don't have direct light, and I think the result is positive. But as I was saying, remember that you can take selfies with the rear photo system and see the quality of photography that we have. It really improves a lot because it gives us an excellent level of detail, and since it does have autofocus now, we will definitely see a very good result as well. Even the ultra-wide camera can give you a good night selfie photo result. Therefore, selfies in the daytime with this rear photo system will definitely be of very good quality. That's why it will be more advisable for you to take selfies using the external display. Notice how the ultra-wide camera also has an excellent backlit performance in this type of selfies with a lot of space. Also, again, it allows us to use the 2x camera to notice absolutely every detail of our face. Portrait photography is not positive as it does not keep objects in focus and simply detects bodies and faces. The result in this type of environment is good, with good detection, without cloudy edges, but obviously there are other more advanced devices capable of keeping in focus also objects that are at the same distance. On the back we find 3 cameras. With this, it becomes the vertical style folding device with the most advanced photographic system. The ultra-wide camera is 14mm with 48 megapixels and f2.2 aperture. It does have autofocus and it's a 6-piece lens, so even in macro photography you're going to have excellent results, at least in theory. Then we have the 24mm camera, which also has autofocus and it's also a 6-piece lens, and in this case it has optical stabilization. So the truth is that I continue to insist that it is an advanced photographic system which concludes with a telephoto camera of 47mm. That is an optical zoom 2x approximately, and we have 32 megapixels in its sensor. The lens also has autofocus and has f2.2 aperture. In addition, it also has optical stabilization and it is also a 6-piece lens. I emphasize the 6-piece lens because many manufacturers put 6-piece lens only on the main camera and the other cameras are simpler. But OPPO sincerely that surprises by giving 3 excellent cameras on this back. Next, let's test the capture speed that this device has to try to capture number 1. I'm going to make another attempt simply to be sure how fast the shutter speed of this device can be. As you can see, on my first attempt it was practically the exact moment. On the second attempt, it seemed to capture a little slower, but we could say that it does allow you to capture snappy shots. And in the rear camera, we are going to have available the burst that, in this case, as you realize, exceeds 50 photographs. You can take more than 100 pictures in this burst, so there is no problem. The truth is that it is a very fast burst that allows us to take too many pictures simultaneously. This way, you could very easily capture the exact moment. In the lower right corner, we also have access to color filters including masters and facial retouching, although in this case only with a single parameter. In the upper left corner, we can also enable the preview on the external screen so that the person you are going to take the picture can see if they need to adjust their hair a little. If we tap on the screen, we can adjust the focus and exposure, but if we want more parameters, we can access the Pro mode. Within this mode, we can take the ISO up to 3200, we can also take the shutter speed up to 30 seconds, and we will also have control of the exposure compensation, the focus, and also the white balance. The remarkable thing about this mode is that it also allows us to take pictures in RAW and RAW+, so we have good parameters for more advanced photography. In automatic mode, it will not be able to recognize the documents to scan them, but it has a special mode to do this action and crop all the edges of this sheet. Also, if you press the share button and then look for the print option, notice that you can save it as PDF as well. And if you enable the option in the settings, you do have a QR code scanner directly in the main camera interface. Just a reminder that this is an option that you have to enable manually because it is disabled. All the rear cameras feature a high-resolution mode, but the main camera will be the one that can really get to take a bit more advantage of its 50 megapixels. Although I think it could still take a step forward to raise the level of detail more because I feel like it's not quite up to the same level as the iPhone, for example, which has 48 megapixels. The ultra-wide camera also has 48 megapixels and you could get to reframe pictures, but I insist that those 48 megapixels maybe don't look as well utilized. And finally, the telephoto camera also has a high-resolution mode with 32 megapixels, so you can also get up close to notice a little more detail, but it's very similar to what I was seeing with the front camera. I don't see as much detail as the spec says. Outdoor photos with these cameras will be of very good quality, especially the main camera has a very accurate color representation and will also offer us a very good quality in their lenses. We definitely don't get to see too much serious chromatic aberration, although it is present with a bit of distortion on some edges, but it is something natural being such a small lens. The ultra-wide camera seems to me to have a bit more chromatic aberration, though it's not as severe as we've seen on other devices, but again the edge is where both aberration and distortion can become more pronounced. So they don't look like such advanced lenses, even though the specs did make it clear that it was a 6-piece lens. And the telephoto camera will give us 8 megapixel pictures in automatic mode, although again we see slight red chromatic aberration, but nothing really serious. In fact, this telephoto camera is going to serve us so that through optical zoom we can reach even greater distances. This is a photograph at 5x, then we see a photograph at 10x, and the maximum that allows us to get closer is 20x. And I honestly think the quality is considerably good. Obviously it's not going to be the best zoom in the industry, but within the vertical foldables it's possibly the best zoom device. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera may have slightly darker colors, but I like that it has good saturation and virtually no noise. In fact, note how the main camera still improves the capture of darker scenes, maintaining good color saturation unlike the ultra-wide camera. And finally, the telephoto camera also maintains good color saturation, so the result seems to me to be very good with all three cameras indoors. Next, notice how the backlit preview still looks burnt, but after taking the picture, the main camera seems to me to perform considerably well, balancing highlights and shadows perfectly well while maintaining good color saturation. The ultra-wide camera likewise maintains a good balance of highlights and shadows, even with faces present, so I like the result very much. And the telephoto camera also maintains a good balance, although the color loses a bit of precision. And at night, the result is positive with the ultra-wide camera, which is surprising because most devices perform much worse with the ultra-wide camera. The main camera will also have an excellent performance with good details and good colors as well, even a good balance of lights and shadows. But a curious thing is that the telephoto camera is not always used. If it's a considerably dark scene, the device will opt to apply digital zoom and not optical zoom. However, if you're in another scene that has a little more lighting, it will use the optical zoom camera. So at night, it may drop the zoom performance a bit, especially since it doesn't use the camera when there isn't as much light. Although I was surprised how in other scenes that even I considered darker, he did use the telephoto camera and didn't zoom in to the maximum. Really, this was an area that was too dark and the result surprised me a lot, but it could be a bit inconsistent. I mean, sometimes it does come out well, sometimes it doesn't come out so well. With respect to capturing moving objects, notice that it does perform well, especially obviously in scenes with very good lighting. The ultra-wide camera also performs well in these types of scenes. And the telephoto camera also does well, although you notice how the color is very different from the ultra-wide camera compared to the telephoto camera, because the ultra-wide camera gives us a little bit more exaggerated colors and the telephoto camera gives us more natural colors. So I would like to have a much more accurate color balance around the three cameras. The focus of the main camera can also get very good if a bit far away. If you want to get closer, you will need the ultra-wide camera and the result can become good, although a bit complex as you need to be very static. But notice how you can also use the zoom camera to focus on this kind of macro objects. And the result is very nice because the bokeh effect generated in the background is totally natural. So macro photography is positive in this cell phone. And as additional details, note how in addition to the ultra-wide camera, you could use panoramic photography to capture scenes of much larger space. And yes, they are good resolution pictures, so you can get to notice good details in this kind of pictures. I wish it would also allow us to take panoramic pictures with the ultra-wide camera, but that's not possible. The portrait mode I personally think is a very good quality. Note how we have excellent color management, as well as good detection of this area of the foreground and background. The background is perfectly well out of focus with a good bokeh effect, and also despite being objects, in the foreground it maintains a good focus with good precision, no cloudy edges are seen, and even in this case it is a portrait backlit scene and the result is very good. You can also take portrait shots with the 2x lens and the result is also good, although again it strikes me that the color changes drastically with respect to the photograph with the main lens. And speaking of color, note how you can use some special filters made with Hasselblad, although some look a little darker, but they are different colors that you can use when taking portrait pictures. Something I liked about this cell phone is that all cameras can record in 4K at 30 frames per second, which is the maximum quality supported by the device. And I'm talking about the front camera and the 3 rear cameras, so the quality is excellent in that sense. Although I do wish it also had 4K at 60 frames per second available like other high-end devices. In fact, if you want to record at 60 frames per second, you will have to do it in Full HD, and it is only possible to do this with the main camera and the ultra-wide camera. When you start your recording, you will have a quite comfortable slider for zooming, although it does not have some shortcuts to specific zoom settings, such as switching between the 3 lenses and similar things as we do see in other devices. What we can do is take pictures and also pause and resume this recording, as well as turn on the flashlight without the need to cut our recording. What we cannot do is rotate to the front camera unless we press the stop button. Remember that you can also enable this button so that you have the preview on the back, but note that when you use the external screen to record, you can only record in Full HD. That is a very weak point because even with the device closed, if you only want to record using the external screen, the video will be in Full HD and not 4K. I think that could be corrected through an update. The resolution will also drop to Full HD if you use any special color effects. But one good thing is that it integrates a movie mode through which we have manual parameters to control our video recording, including a log mode to colorize the video after recording. These are quite advanced settings that are honestly quite nice to see in such a compact device. The 4K recording is absolutely fine. I like that it has natural colors, in this case do not feel so saturated or artificial colors, and we do not see that the focus is having problems, although the white balance could get to change at times and that is not so nice. But in this case, unlike the photograph, it seems to maintain a little more accurate color between the ultra-wide camera, the main camera and the telephoto camera. Although you do get to notice the change and obviously it's going to be noticeable, but I think the result is completely fine. In fact, with the telephoto camera, you can help yourself to zoom in a little further. In this case, it is 10x. So it's not as spectacular a zoom as in photography, but it can help. And I like that the focus can be adjusted quite easily, even on objects that are not so well defined. So I consider it to be a focus with good precision. Remember also that the ultra-wide camera does have autofocus, so it can also adjust its focus with good quality in these kinds of scenarios. In fact, also with slightly more aggressive movements, the focus seems to me to react in a good way. So both in subtle and more aggressive movements, I think the focus does become very accurate on each of the lenses. So the experience, I think, is really good when shooting. Ideally though, I would like to maintain a very similar color rendering on all 3 lenses, and that would possibly be the biggest flaw. Especially since the change between prime and ultra-wide can be noticed more aggressively in a jump. I find the backlit recording to be very good in the sense of light and shadow balance, although the color becomes much more yellow. So, it's not as accurate color, but it really is spectacular how it manages to balance highlights and shadows very well with the main camera and in fact also with the ultra-wide camera. Although here we noticed with the ultra-wide camera a little bit more natural color, unlike the main camera where the result was much more yellow. With the telephoto camera, we do not have such a good backlight performance. In this case, it does give priority to illuminating the face, sacrificing the more illuminated areas of the back. Indoors, we will again see something very similar to what we saw in photography. That is, the main camera gives us a very good quality with virtually no noise and good color saturation, while the ultra-wide camera seems to blur the noise a bit more and therefore loses a bit more detail, but the result is quite good. And finally, in this case, we will notice that the zoom camera is no longer used because it does not have as much light input. At night, we will notice practically the same. We have good detail with the main camera and virtually no noise. And when we switched to the ultra-wide camera, I was honestly surprised that there wasn't as much noise present, unlike other devices I've tested. So the main and ultra-wide record, well at night, but again we noticed that when zooming in, you're not going to use the telephoto camera because of the low light conditions there. Also, in darker areas, even with the main camera, you start to notice a little more noise than we would like, which is actually not noticeable with the ultra-wide camera. So, the truth is that this behavior could still get to improve through some updates that we hope they will send. But I do find it very curious that it allows us to record at night with the main and the ultra-wide camera but not with the telephoto, especially, as I said, in areas with higher levels of darkness. However, if you start your recording in a well-lit area, you will notice that it does use the telephoto camera and it does allow you to switch to the main camera as well. So, the performance is very curious. Recording in 4K, you will notice that it does offer a good level of stabilization. Although I found it curious that the actual speed is 26 frames per second, but I found that even so, the result is still good with good movement, even when running. But if you want to record scenes with much more aggressive motion, you can select the super stable mode, although it changes the resolution to full HD at 60 frames per second. But I think it does a good job of disguising even the most aggressive running movements. With the ultra-wide camera, you also have good stabilization even without the super stable mode. So you have perfectly good control over all of this. And if you enable the super stable mode on the ultra-wide camera, you're also going to have good performance, although the level of detail is not as high. But I think all the stabilization modes work well. My ideal would be that the super stable mode would also work in 4K, but currently no device gives you that. The telephoto camera does not have such positive stabilization, even though it does have optical stabilization. But I think the digital stabilization is still not as high as the one we see in some other devices. In this case, we will find fast camera that can go from 10x, which for movements of people seems to me a little fast and also has no stabilization. So its main use will be in landscapes because it can reach up to 960x. And believe me, you can record with very good quality the movement of clouds, or even a sunrise or sunset. So I really like the fast camera, but it's only in full HD and you can't record in 4K with this format. Another thing that could be fixed with an update. Slow motion can be at 240 frames per second in full HD, so we have a considerably good quality. But in fact, we can go even slower, up to 480 frames per second. Although the resolution is decreased to HD, so we do not have such a detailed result, but very slow for action scenes that you want to share on a social network. It also has a portrait video recording mode, blurring the background and applying a bokeh effect, although the detection looks very artificial. You immediately notice that it's a faked result, and you'll notice that the intensity of the blur is not increased or decreased depending on your distance. So the result is definitely not natural, and with respect to objects, you're gonna notice that it's not able to keep them in focus. So the truth is that the result is too simple and still has a lot of room for improvement. And although it does allow us to record with portrait mode using zoom 2x, you should know that it is digital zoom and not optical. So it is practically the same result, giving us a still not very pleasant experience. The front camera in 4K, you will notice that it is not going to give you stabilization. So the movement feels a little weird, and since it has fixed focus, you do need to be at an ideal distance to have a higher level of detail. In addition, we also see a bit of an aggressive jump in the white balance. But the recording in controlled light is absolutely spectacular, as it does manage to balance highlights and shadows almost perfectly. So that's its strongest point, but the fact of not having stabilization and the low level of detail despite being a video in 4K make me overall not like the result so much. Note how recording with the external screen we have a higher level of detail, although in this case we see that the resolution drops to full HD inexplicably since the camera can record in 4K, but if you are using the external screen it only records in full HD. Also, it doesn't allow you to switch to the ultra-wide camera without the need to cut your clip, but if you record with the ultra-wide camera, you are going to have good quality again with digital stabilization, but again in full HD, even though the camera could record in 4K theoretically speaking. The focus is obviously going to react very well with this ultra-wide camera, so for blogging it would be perfect, but it doesn't let us record in 4K. In fact, it is curious that it also allows us to record with the telephoto camera. I see it useful for some beauty blogger. Possibly if you want to focus more on the face, you can do it perfectly well. Although again, you lose the 4K resolution. Indoors, the front camera definitely records with a much paler format and with greater presence of noise, so I did not really like the result that is able to give us. Note how recording with the external system we have a much more vibrant color and also better contrast, but the video drops to full HD resolution. And finally at night, if we have a well-lit area, the result I think will still be positive, but if we are in some darker areas, it will definitely give us a noisier experience. And even though the video tells us it's 30 frames per second, overall I feel like it's going at a lower rate in order to collect more lighting. When you're in an area with a lot more darkness, the device is automatically going to brighten its display to try to illuminate your face well. And I think the noise handling is positive, although it's obviously not something that's spectacular. If you record with the rear system, I think the result will be much nicer, but again, the resolution is diminished. However, the level of detail I think even gets to look higher quality. And even in the backlit video areas at night, we're going to have a very good performance compared to what we were seeing with the main camera. And if you record yourself with the ultra-wide camera at night, we also have a good result. As we already saw, this camera has good light input, so even in very dark conditions, it manages to handle noise well. Although in extreme scenes with a lot of movement, definitely the result will not be so nice, but it is something normal in any camera. This front camera does offer us a fast camera mode, although again the 4K option is removed and it can be a bit faster than we would like for simple movements. Interestingly, on the front camera, it also includes a super stable mode for much more action scenes, although again the 4K resolution is lost. And throughout this video, you also notice how the white balance can change a bit aggressively. It doesn't include a front slow motion mode, but it does have a portrait mode with this camera, which is going to turn out very similar to what we were seeing with the rear camera. Although from my point of view, in this case, the edge detection is slightly better. But it is still noticeable that it is an artificial result, and like many front camera options, it is not in 4K. Finally, I want to highlight the absence of dual recording mode that OPPO promotes a lot in their devices, but curiously in this, which is one of its high-end devices, has not placed it. Hopefully with a future update it will improve in all these respects. At the moment, I think the device had given me very high expectations, and I think it has failed to meet them 100%. Especially when it comes to video recording. This device comes with ColorOS 13.2, running on Android 13, but we are already sure that it will soon receive Android 14 and ColorOS 14 because this device has 4 years of software updates and 5 years of guaranteed security patches, matching its biggest competitor, the Samsung device. So we are in front of an excellent update policy that guarantees us that this device is going to have a very extended lifetime. But let's get right down to talking about some special features that this device has, starting with foldable functions. As you can see, the manufacturer allows us to customize our external display with a very nice variety of covers. Some of them are special mascots. OPPO calls them interactive mascots because they will react to the current state of the phone. For example, if it has low battery, it will appear with a tired face or something like that. Or if it's charging, it will appear exercising. So, there are several animations that are available with all these pets. The truth is that it is quite interesting the proposal that OPPO has, so you can customize that external screen completely to your liking. The animations look very nice and also has a shortcut in the corner that you can customize for the access you want. In fact, there are also other covers that do allow us to have more shortcuts. For example, the weather that will also synchronize with your location. And if it is raining, a screen with the same animation will appear. They also allow us to change the font of that clock and the color as well that we have available here in the widgets. Plus, we can change each of these 3 selectors. So, this external screen definitely has good customization, and from this same screen you can quickly make a change to another cover if you prefer. Only if you want to add a new cover to this list, it will tell you to unfold the phone. So, in this cover we will have direct access to the camera, but the truth is that there are not so many quick widgets. As you notice, to the left, there is nothing, and curiously in this case, also does not react from top to bottom. Although I have in my mind that I had already tried it and the quick settings came out, but it seems not. Notifications will be appearing in this lower part, and note how we can interact with them. We can click on them and they will appear in extended form, with some options such as reply or mark as read in the case of WhatsApp, or we can even open the application directly. In the case of the answers, we will be able to respond with emojis with a quick reply, or we can dictate. For example, we will select an emoji, and as you can see, a good list of options appears. Although they are not absolutely all emojis. The predefined quick responses you can set previously, so you can edit and reorder them completely to your liking, and finally you can dictate, but the first time you will need to deploy the phone to give permission. Honestly, this thing of having to deploy the phone to authorize, I think it could be improved. They should give the option from the external screen, because the first time you do it, look how the message is lost. But by swiping from right to left, you will also be able to access a good list of applications. For example, if I can fully access WhatsApp to reply to this message, but the keyboard appears a little bit stranger. Even so, you could perfectly get to right and you still keep a little space to slide inside the message. The truth is that I feel it does give us a good typing experience and perfectly allows us to use these apps to exit and go to another conversation. But now that I received another notification, let's test the dictation option once we have given permission. I am now typing with my voice to easily reply. It seems to work very handy, and here you can perfectly send that message. When we have more than one notification, we get the message that says to unread, and we can click on this notification to expand it. But notice how once we close the notification, we can see the second one. I mean, we can't give a glance to all notifications at the same time, and I feel that could be improved. But the advantage is that this generation already allows us to open many applications, although not all of them are compatible. Notice how there is a list of apps that you can seamlessly add or remove from that external screen. Most of the apps are part of a program called Labs at OPPO, so they are still in an experimental format, but honestly they work very well. So that's a good number, including WhatsApp, TikTok, Telegram, YouTube, even Netflix, Gmail, and a few others. So the experience on this external screen becomes much more advanced compared against what we see on other foldable devices. Only detail is that it does not offer us multitasking, so we can only completely exit the application before entering another, but we cannot keep them in one view with several applications open at the same time. But the fact that it is a vertically oriented screen like the internal screens makes the apps much easier to adapt, and developers don't need to make as many changes. I really like the external screen, although I also wish they kept the widgets they removed. Now the widgets have become mini apps that we can open quickly. OPPO's apps come perfectly adapted for use on this smaller screen. So OPPO's apps are a bit more simplified, but other manufacturers' apps are complete. Something positive is that it also has always on display on this external screen, so that it always shows us the time in case we have activated this option. In fact, in the configuration, we can choose how we want this always on screen to behave, if we want it to show our mascot or any other clock or different dial. And through this external screen, we will also be able to answer or reject incoming calls. In fact, by simply unfolding the cell phone, we could answer, although it is very curious that it does not show the button to hang up, but if we want to do that option, we must slide down this button. In addition, you can select the behavior of the device when you fold the phone to know if you want the screen to stay on for an instant more or you want it to turn off immediately. In this way, you can anyway consult a little more information. And a completely useless feature on this device is the edge lighting, which will light up the edges of the screen to indicate a notification or a call. But I say it is completely useless because normally when you are not using your phone, it is advisable to keep it closed to protect the internal screen. So for me, this function does not make sense. What does make sense is the new sidebar that is in this part, because you can also place recent files. Then you can drag and drop content from this file selector to another application. For example, let's say you recently took several pictures with your friends and then they tell you to send them via WhatsApp. By simply opening the sidebar, you can open recent files and then drag these images to WhatsApp and you can easily send them. In fact, you can also select multiple images at the same time and drag them all to WhatsApp for faster sending. So the truth is that feature looks very nice. But this sidebar contains not only images and recent documents, but also tools for taking screenshots or screen recordings. In addition, an option to translate the content you are displaying on the screen, and of course, direct access to several applications where you can run them in a floating mode. This can be very useful to open several applications at the same time. In fact, you have a mini mode and a slightly more extended mode. In addition, you can move it along the entire screen. The only detail is that it only allows you to open one application of this style at the same time and does not support YouTube or Instagram in this format. So the truth is that there is still much room for improvement, as this type of unsupported applications will only work as a shortcut and the application will open in full screen. Another utility will be inside the photo editor, where you can select the object eraser. It will download for a moment and you select the object you want to delete and then apply the changes. At times it can be a much more accurate removal, and at other times it can become a bit more artificial, but I think the end result can be pleasing in many scenarios. Finally, another feature added by the system is Shelf, which is a kind of dashboard where you can place some quick information widgets, and it also supports a Spotify widget and another special Snapchat widget. You can enable or disable this feature completely to your liking, as it has a global search engine as well. The truth is that it is an extremely mature operating system that also feels well realized, above all also by the experience of the optical engine. In this case, OPPO has given special emphasis to this feature through OHaptics. In this case, you can customize the intensity of this optical response, which is a motor on the x-axis. So honestly, you interact very well with the whole system. Every time you finish a list, it emits a little vibration also when typing and interacting with other applications. This is something that I can't convey to you through video, but when you have the device in your hand, it feels too good. However, at the same time, it is an operating system that I think could be improved in several aspects. And another suggestion would be to improve the one-handed mode. Since this mode is the same as the iPhone, and honestly it does not seem to me the best implementation, because there are times where it is difficult to reach the keyboard, and when enabling the one-handed use mode, the keyboard simply disappears. So it is very complicated to type with one hand on this device. Unless you enable this special mode on the keyboard, and this way it will be a little bit easier. But honestly, I think there are other devices that have a much better one-handed mode compared to OPPO's implementation. This device has a side fingerprint reader that allows up to 5 registrations. Honestly, it works well, although in my case I had to put my finger several times, probably because it is a little thin reader, but its operation and reading is correct. Although it is very strange that when entering the security section looks like a device with pure Android. It even changes the color of the wallpaper, and that the truth is that it does give a feeling of a device that is not 100% finished in terms of software development. Through the settings, you can choose whether you need to press the button or simply rest your finger on it for unlocking to take place. It also has facial recognition, although it is only in 2 dimensions, so it is still not 100% secure unlocking. Face unlocking will also be enabled for the external display using the camera, so it can become convenient. Although I insist that it is not as secure as a 3-dimensional face unlock. It includes Google's password manager to automatically fill in some username and password fields, but it doesn't do any verification before filling in. This is a security gap that you can fix if you go to Google's settings to finally specify that if you want to verify first before autofilling any password fields. Ideally, OPPO should have its own password manager and not rely on Google's implementation. And something very positive about this cell phone is that it has many special tools for security, such as app lock, hide apps, also a private safe, and even a system cloner that I had not seen in OPPO. So with all those features, you can have a much safer experience in case you get to lend your already unlocked cell phone or something similar. In fact, it also includes the space for children, so if you lend your cell phone to a little one, you can select which applications or games will be available and they will not be able to do anything that you have not authorized. In fact, it also has some parental controls where you can set whether or not you want to have internet connection, and also if you want to have time limit for each session and tools to protect the view. So in this security approach, it also delivers in a good way. It has an application called Security Center where we will notice that it has an alliance with Avast to scan applications and everything you have installed to avoid any malware. But if you get to lose your device, you will depend entirely again on Google's own implementation to find your device. Ideally, OPPO would like to create its own tool, but for now, it's up to Google. Also has the options of digital wellness and parental control. So here you can see statistics of your time consumption in certain applications and also set timers to avoid becoming addicted to your cell phone. In addition to setting a distraction-free mode to not let you enter certain applications at certain times. You can also use this cell phone to configure some other cell phones of your family in order to keep a good control. And finally, with respect to emergency tools, also has these options to make an immediate call to the emergency service in any given situation. You simply have to press the button 5 times repeatedly and immediately the options will appear in addition to the medical information. You can set up your emergency contacts and also your medical information so they can quickly preview it. So overall, I think they do bring some very good security-focused tools. The battery experience will be positive. Even though it doesn't offer us such a big battery because it's 4,300 milliamps, in my testing it performed about the same as devices with 5,000 milliamp batteries perform on average. So it seems to have a good optimization also for the consumption of applications running in the background. Although battery life is always going to depend 100% on how you use your phone. But based on the same test I do on all devices, I consider that it does give us a good experience. In addition, it integrates a daily power saving mode that can help you in your day-to-day, and also has a much more extreme saving mode that could serve you in an emergency when you have very little energy left, as it will restrict virtually all functions, but it will allow you to add 3 applications that you consider essential. So for an emergency case, I think it comes in handy. The charger is SuperVOOC and it does come included in the box. That's great news because you don't need to buy it separately, but it's also a considerably fast charger. Although the included charger is 67 watts, in reality the maximum charge the device supports is 44 watts, but it's still very fast. In 15 minutes it got me back to 33% power, in 30 minutes it was up to 60%, and the full charge finished it in 59 minutes. I wish the charger had USB-C for a more modern experience, but fortunately it does support the power delivery standard, although the fastest charging you're going to get with OPPO's SuperVOOC chargers. The bad news is that it doesn't have wireless charging and therefore won't have reversible wireless charging either. That's another of its weaknesses against the Galaxy Z Flip 5. Although it makes up for having such fast charging, but always for convenience, it would be nice to have wireless charging, especially considering it's a high-end device. To take care of the health of the battery, fortunately you have a section in the settings that allows us to see the maximum capacity that still retains the battery. So if you are going to buy this device used, it would be very good to check how much this battery has degraded. It also comes with optimized charging mode, so you can leave it charging overnight and it will charge slowly. Although we still don't see the charging lock, but that will probably come with the next ColorOS 14 update. So in conclusion, it gives us a good experience, although it would be much better if it gives us wireless charging. Connectivity will also be good since it does support 5G networks, and therefore we have a very good download speed in compatible regions. In Mexico, I feel that it is still not such a differential point, but it is appreciated that it already comes with this connectivity so that in the future, when the network has a much more widespread implementation, we will surely have very good download speeds. In addition, through the configuration, you can say how you want the applications to access the internet, if you want them to access the internet with both Wi-Fi and mobile data, or only through Wi-Fi. And another great thing for the global market is that it does have eSIM. That is, you can add phone services simply by scanning a QR code when you're on the go. Wi-Fi connectivity is 5, so it is very strange that it does not have Wi-Fi 6. It still has good download speeds, but definitely that for this price, it's too rare that it doesn't have the latest Wi-Fi connectivity. Obviously, this is always going to depend on your internet provider, but in my case, it seems to be giving good speeds. As for Bluetooth connectivity, we do have pretty much the latest with version 5.3, giving us good stability, and it's also going to have NFC so you can set it up and make mobile payments. You can use Google Pay or some other banking application to set up your cards, or also to link to devices by simply bringing the cell phone closer. In this case, it has an NFC antenna that is not only one zone, so simply bringing the device close to it will detect it well. It does not have FM radio or wired screen projection, but it does have wireless screen projection. In addition, it is a little more advanced projection since notifications will stay on your cell phone, so they are not projected on the TV or monitor. You are projecting your entire screen. It also has Android Auto to connect to the screen of your car, and it has a good number of sensors such as accelerometer, geomagnetic field sensor, orientation sensor, gyroscope, light sensor, but the proximity sensor is virtual, so it can be much more complex to activate. It's only enabled when you're close to your ear, so it gives us an experience that is not satisfactory for a device of this price. The ecosystem may vary depending on the different countries. In Mexico, OPPO still does not have a very extended ecosystem, so in addition to cell phones, it does offer OPPO Enco, which are its headphones with a good variety, and it also offers an OPPO band. But we still don't have the OPPO Watch or the OPPO Pad, which is available in Europe and other regions. So the ecosystem still feels very short. We could say that it is under development and it still doesn't feel like a seamless integration and interaction experience between all its devices. However, OPPO includes some technologies for interaction between its devices, such as OPPO Share, to be able to send and receive files wirelessly and with good speed. Although note the amount of permissions it asked me, and this for a user who does not have the knowledge can become too complex. So, being a system tool, I would like to have all the permissions already enabled. OPPO also has another technology called Multi-Screen Connect, which would allow you to connect to your laptop. But again, there are several permissions that have to be enabled bit by bit, and you also have to manually install the app on your computer. So the setup can become a bit complex. It is not such a comfortable interaction, unlike other manufacturers that bring everything perfectly integrated, because OPPO also does not have laptops for sale. But with this tool, you could use your cell phone from the computer, although I insist that being an experience that you will have to install separately, it is likely that you can get to have some inconvenience from time to time. In many aspects, it feels that this device is very dependent on Google. I mentioned some of them a moment ago, but also the cloud storage will be through Google Drive, where we are offered 15 gigabytes. And even within the gallery, you'll notice that OPPO's cloud backup has also been removed and suggests us to connect to Google Photos directly. Personally, I would like to see OPPO strongly offering you storage in its own cloud and also its own implementation of home devices, since in this case you depend also on Google Home, where you can see the home devices you have configured. And also from the quick settings panel, you have direct access to these controls. Seeing OPPO depending so much on Google gives us a feeling that it is still not big enough. Let's talk about the performance now as we do the application opening test. It has the MediaTek Dimensity 9200 processor, a considerably good processor for applications, although we will see its performance in games later on. It offers us 12 gigabytes of physical RAM and another 12 gigabytes of virtual RAM in case you want to enable it. It took 2.1 seconds on average to open each of these applications, confirming that it will have the performance of a high-end device. The truth is that the movement between applications will be lightning fast. The opening also, and of course also be interacting between several open applications will be completely good due to the large amount of RAM it offers, although in this case we just saw a restart of an application. So, it's not reboot free, and that's probably a point of improvement because it really does have a very large amount of RAM, and with that high amount of RAM, it should have near flawless multitasking performance. Although, as you realize, it seems that it was simply one application that got to reboot and the rest of the applications have performed completely fine. In fact, also when you are browsing within the apps, you will surely have a completely good experience because you are not going to notice that the device is taking a long time to load any kind of element. And likewise, even though there is multimedia content, images or videos or whatever, notice that it maintains an extremely smooth performance. In the settings, you can determine how much you want to expand the RAM through virtual RAM or if you want to disable it. By default, the option is turned on with 4 GB of RAM, although I honestly think this is not necessary. The storage is also very good with 256 GB, although the bad news is that you can't use micro SD cards, but I think the internal storage does go according to the price at which the device is distributed. For games, it will include an application that compiles the rest and gives us several options. In addition to the games we have installed, it offers us a section of instant games that we do not need to download to play. These are much more casual games, so it would come in handy if you don't want them to use up internal space. But for those who want a much more advanced gaming experience, let me tell you all the options we have available within these games. When you log in, notice how it immediately enables the application to allow access to Pro Gamer mode, where we can turn the power up to the maximum possible. But if we want to save battery, we can also access a balanced mode or a low power mode, depending on our priorities. We also have a music control. In this case, it is working with YouTube, but it also works with any other music player. We also have direct access to applications that we can open in floating windows so we don't leave our game to answer a message. And it also has the championship mode that will allow us to block any type of interruption and optimize the network connectivity to the maximum so that there is nothing to spoil the experience when playing. You can also enable a different style of notifications so that you are not interrupted while you are playing. Note how in this case I'm in a game and when I receive a notification it doesn't appear as a bubble that is completely in the way on the screen. But I can also select the notification with bullets and see how it will appear in motion, and you can also select the speed you want it to take. Although again it is something you must enable manually in the permissions. But this type of notification is definitely nice because it doesn't interrupt you completely and you can read it anyway. So it comes in handy when you are playing a game. Look, here just came a notification from WhatsApp. So it's a feature that comes in handy when you're playing. Look how I just received a WhatsApp notification and I can read it without interrupting my game. You can also block incoming calls, take screenshots in image or video, and also optimize the entire network flow. Although again, you need to go to enable permissions manually. I don't know why these permissions are not turned on when you start the phone. You will also find a button to optimize the touch response to improve your gameplay experience. You can also block any additional on-screen gestures in order to avoid unwanted touches. And you can cache the game so that the next time it starts much faster. You also have a voice changer for games that feature active chat, and you have constant system status monitoring so you can see the frames per second and your CPU and GPU consumption. You can also lock the device as the game downloads certain content to avoid consuming so much battery. And finally, you have volume adjustment and additional tidbits, so it offers us very good tools to improve our gaming experience. In Call of Duty, by default, it gives us the very high graphics quality at a maximum rate, which is positive with respect to graphics compatibility. In fact, we can also go up to an ultra frame rate, although the graphic quality is lowered to a medium setting. With the high quality, fortunately, despite not being a Snapdragon processor, it does give us access to good effects, which was exactly what we could ask of it at this price. It also supports super resolution mode. If you choose the ultra frame setting, note that it seems that it will give us a very high rate of frames per second and also compatible with various effects. We first ran the game at the maximum rate and it did give us a good experience, although it did bump the performance to 50 frames per second after about 2 minutes of a 60 frames per second game. So we can be pretty sure that this device comes to limit its performance to avoid overheating, even though we already see a high temperature in this content that is not yet so complex. In fact, note how after this first game we selected the ultra rate and it did not go above 50 frames per second. So Really, when it is already very hot, it is not going to be able to take advantage of the good screen it has, since it should go to about 90 frames per second by the configuration we set, but due to the heating, it did not get to go above 50, and it is definitely not going to be a pleasant experience for the most demanding in gaming. In the Legends game, we changed the automatic setting to manually set something that goes according to the price of this equipment, so we selected the graphic detail in Ultra at about 60 frames per second. And again, due to the heat that the device had from previous games, it was totally limited to 50 frames per second. So this confirms to us that when the device is already a little hot, it's going to bump up to 50, which honestly isn't that low of a number, but those who were hoping to take advantage of the 120Hz screen could definitely run into unhappiness because of the heat the device limits its performance. In the SpongeBob game, this device by default, we selected the resolution and quality on a medium setting. However, for a price-conscious test, we chose the epic quality and resolution at 60 frames per second. And again, due to the high temperatures, the device was not able to push its rate to too high numbers. Fortunately, it always goes above 30, which already gives us a smooth experience, but it's not what the most demanding gamers want. Definitely that here gives us an experience that is playable, but that the most demanding are gonna feel like something very short. In fact, in this game we were able to experience a little more frame drops for a few moments, as the temperature rose up to 44 degrees Celsius on the outside. Definitely a device that has too much heating, possibly because of the little space it has on the inside for cooling layers or something like that. Let's remember that it is a foldable and has all its components as tight as possible to save and take advantage of as much space as possible. And finally, in Genshin Impact, by default the device loads the medium graphics quality, but for the price-appropriate test we set the quality very high with 60 frames per second and very high motion blur. And again, although the experience does go above 30, which is already positive, it is not at the same level of other devices of this price. If your priority is to play with very high graphics, it would still be best to buy a traditional device and not a folding device. At least, not a vertical folding one, as is the case with this device, since the heating does play against it. And although it does not give us a completely bad experience, considering the best of the options if your priority is to play games. Obviously, if you're going to play much simpler content such as Candy Crush, Cut the Rope, or similar games that are simply in 2 dimensions, you'll have a completely good experience. But for games of this style with very advanced graphics, the experience is not going to be as positive because of the heating. For the moment, this has been all regarding this device. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you know you can tell us about it, and we'll see you next time.